Good morning, church. Welcome to Graduation Sunday here at North Heights. I'm so thankful that you're all here. Today we have the opportunity to celebrate with some of our young people who have accomplished something really spectacular, and I'm glad that you're all going to be here and be a part of that. Really, what that means is we get to share in graduation cake afterwards, so I hope that you'll stick around. Immediately after services this morning, we're going to have our senior presentations. So after the closing prayer, just have a seat. If you have a child in Bible hour, go ahead and go get them. We don't want to wear out our precious Bible hour teachers. But come on back in. We're going to go ahead and get right into it. We'll have the pictures of our seniors up on the slideshow behind us. I will read some information about them. We'll ask our seniors to come up one at a time. I'll call you up, and we'll have an elder come up with you, and that way they can give you a Bible that hopefully most of us have written a little encouragement in. And then the elder will say a prayer, and after we've done that for all of we have 7 graduating seniors today. After that, we will have a potluck in their honor, and the seniors have their tables set up in the new fellowship hall, so please go check that out. Stick around. See, the thing is, there's no reason to go buy lunch today. There's no reason to go home and actually cook something because we have food ready for you, and we want you to stick around. And there's no services this evening. It's 5th Sunday, so just plan on spending your lunchtime with us today and encourage those seniors and hang out with us. We want you here. So, graduation, in case you didn't know, it's kind of a big deal. As Jim kind of mentioned in his prayer, it's a milestone. You know, it marks the time. You know, you've been in high school for what seems like forever. You know, I don't remember a time before I was in school. So, you know, when it was my graduation, I'd spent my whole life in school, and then now you come to this moment where you're out. You've left that phase of life, and you're looking at the next phase. You know, you've reached that milestone. There's 1 mile behind you. The next one's coming up. And as he said, you know, we have lots of these milestones along the way. There's different forms. You know, he mentioned some like your child's first steps and first words. Some ones that I thought of were when you get your first car, and you know you're no longer asking your parents for a ride or your friends. You're not bumming a ride from them. You get this new dose of freedom. You enter this new phase of freedom in your life. And then, you know, another milestone's when you get married and you lose all that freedom. It's true. And then later you get married, you have children, and you lose all the money that you made during that freedom. And so, but each time we have these phases that we leave one, you know, we're working towards it, and then it comes, it's here, and there's usually this little tiny gap in between, like leaving high school and then whatever's coming next. Some of our graduates are going to the military, some of them are going to the workforce, some of them are continuing their education. It doesn't matter. When we come to these phases, what almost always accompanies this phase change is advice. This time of year, our graduates are going to be getting a lot of advice. You know, think about when, for anything, when you get that car, you know, that first car, you're going to have some uncle come out of the woodwork, and he's going to want to tell you all about his first car. And he's going to tell you, now, don't get something shiny and flashy and new. You don't need the bells and whistles. Just get you a good, reliable, used car. You know, it gets good gas mileage. Come ask me. I would love to tell you about the car I drove in college that had no air conditioning. But it was awesome. When you get married, oh goodness, when you get married and have kids, you're going to get advice whether you ask for it or not. When Mandy and I were engaged, she had a wedding shower. And it was just ladies, I wasn't there, but she told me about it, that at one point they all sat in a circle, and each lady that was married, they went around, and each married woman gave a piece of advice to Mandy, and some other stenographer there was writing it down for her. But it's true, that's what a stenographer does. My mother, though, was in that circle. And the advice that my beloved mom gave to my bride-to-be was, have children immediately. Yes, that's what I'd say. I would laugh at it too, because it's not always good. That was because she wanted grandbabies. That was not for our benefit. Advice. We love giving advice. In these times where we kind of enter into these new phases, we want to bestow the wisdom, the experiences that we've had. Back in 1999, one of the most popular songs on the radio at this graduation time of year was by a guy named Baz Luhrmann. It wasn't even a song, it's just he was talking, and it starts with, "To the graduating class of 1999. Anybody know what he's going to say next? Wear sunscreen. You remember that song? It's a song because for the next 5 minutes, he just talks. He doesn't sing at all. He doesn't even rhyme. He just, wear sunscreen and dance and forget the bad. Like he just bestows piece after piece of advice with some music in the background. But people loved this. It was on the radio all the time. I can remember the most of the song. It was catchy. Did you know that the internet has advice? Most of it absolute garbage, but I did scour the internet and I found a few pieces of advice that I thought were real gems that I'd share with you this morning. So some of you out there are single and at some point want to put yourself on the market there. So when you get ready, marry someone who has a different favorite cereal than you so that they don't eat your cereal. You might save yourself some fights there. Okay, for those of you who are getting ready to go into college, or if you're in college, this is how I kind of lived my college tenure. If you wait until the last minute to do something, it will only take 1 minute to do. That's a true story. For you graduates today, you 12th graders and you 11th graders that are about to become 12th graders, even though you are in the 12th grade, do not join a senior dating website. Does not mean the same thing. Not what you think. And then last one here, this is just a general piece of advice for everyone here. No matter how good the soap smells, do not walk out of a public restroom smelling your hands. Okay? So there you go. Been there, done that kind of stuff, and we want to pass on that advice. Well, the Israelites were having a graduation of sorts. They had spent 400 years as slaves in Egypt, and they're coming out of that. And they're looking at a new phase that they're heading towards, which is going to be a freedom in Canaan. And if you would, turn with me to Leviticus chapter 18. We're going to see what God has to say to his children in this kind of graduation time. Leviticus chapter 18. I'll read it in just a second. And you think about it, this scenario here, leaving 400 years of captivity and slavery and looking forward to the new freedom, isn't that how our seniors probably feel today? That I've been slaves in high school for 400 years and now I'm looking at freedom up and coming. And so God has some advice for his children. Chapter 18, starting in verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel, and say to them, I am the Lord your God. You shall not do as they do in the land of Egypt where you lived, and you shall not do as they do in the land of Canaan to which I am bringing you. You shall not walk in their statutes. You shall follow my rules and keep my statutes and walk in them. I am the Lord your God." So they've been 400 years, plus 400 plus years in the land of Egypt, a land dominated by polytheism. I mean, gods for everything, a god for the Nile, and a god for the sun, and a god for the rain, and just God, 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 God. In fact, Pharaoh himself, a mortal man that people knew he was going to die eventually, sure, he's a god too. Why not? And so they've spent all this time being steeped in this culture of believe what you want and worship whatever you want, and God pulls them out and says, don't be like that. And I'm leading you to a land, to Canaan, a land dominated by polytheism. There's Baal and Asherah and Molech and dozens of other gods. And he's telling them, you're going to be surrounded by this cultural influence. Don't be like that, though. You are called to be different. You've been surrounded by it. You're going to be surrounded by it. But you must not become a part of it. You must be different. You must be set apart. As he says here in chapter 18 we just read, he says, don't be like those people. And then he gives some specifics for the rest of the chapter of here's how you're not supposed to be like those people. And mostly has to do with relationships and don't sacrifice your children. And then in chapter 19 he says, instead, verse 2, speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Don't be like the cultures that you're steeped in, that you're surrounded by. Don't be like them. Be holy as I am holy. Holy meaning separate, special, set apart, different. And notice that holiness is God's most defining attribute. It is the only thing that he is referred to 3 times over. God is holy, holy, holy. He's not just a little bit. He is massively, unimaginably different, set apart, and special. And he says, I want you to be holy as I am holy. So he's not saying, I want you to be just a little bit different. I don't want you to be just a little bit different on the inside. I want you to be massively, noticeably different, set apart, and special, and holy. I want you to be transformed. I don't want you to stay the same. I want you to be as different from the culture as light is from the dark. I want you to display that so that as you're walking down the street, just like if you're walking down the street at night holding a flashlight, instantly noticeable because that flashlight is so different than the dark. I want you displaying the blood. If you remember, what brought them out of Egypt, the last thing that God did that finally broke Pharaoh to allow the Israelites to be freed was the death of the firstborn, the Passover. And what did God tell his children, the Israelites, that they needed to do to be safe during the Passover? He said, take the blood of the lamb and put it on your doorpost. And he's specific. You don't have to turn there, but you could look it up later if you want. It's Exodus chapter 12. He says, specifically, take the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and lintel. He's not just saying just like take a little bit and smear it on there. I want you to cover the whole thing. Take a brush and paint it on. Paint your doors red, basically. What if some Israelite had said, well, I like the way that the outside of my house looks. I don't want to change it. I'm good with the sacrifice, though. I'll make the sacrifice, and I'll take the blood, and I'll just have it in a bowl, and we'll keep it inside. We'll just have it inside the house. And that way, when the angel of death comes through, and he comes in the door, I'll be like, oh, slow your roll there, guy. I got the blood right here. We're good. Would that have worked? What if some Israelite had just been like, God doesn't need to see the blood to know whose house it is. And God knows everything. He automatically knows whose house it is. He doesn't need to see that blood. He knows my heart. I don't need to change anything because God knows me, and he would never. Would that be okay? I mean, just being an Israelite, was that enough? No, God said, I want you to put this blood on your doorpost. And then he even says, then when I come to your house, I will see it. I want it to be visible, not hidden, not tucked away, not just on the inside. I want to see it. And when I see it, then I will pass over. I want it to be where any average Joe can stand in the middle of the street and look down at the row of houses and instantly see where people's faith lied. I want it to be where you could go up to any stranger's house and the first thing you know about that person is what they believed in, to where you could knock on the door and before you even talk to them, you know what they believe in. If you were to meet a stranger, how long would it take for them to know what you believe in? Don't be like the culture that you're surrounded in, Israel. You've been steeped in it. Don't be like those people. Don't, Judges, the book of Judges describes the time of Canaan that they're going to go into as a time of people just doing whatever was right in their own eyes. He says, don't be like the Egyptians who worshiped everything. Don't be like the Canaanites in doing whatever's right in your own eyes. You be holy, be separate, be different, be special. Now fast forward 1,500 years, and we're in approximately 1st century Middle East. Actually, we're in 1st century Asia Minor. And there is a city called Ephesus that has a church, and Paul's writing a letter. Go ahead and turn to Ephesians chapter 4 with me. Ephesians chapter 4. So, Paul is writing to this church, and he also has something to say to them. Starting in verse 17. Ephesians 4:17. Now this I say and testify in the Lord, that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their minds. They are darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, due to their hardness of heart. They have become callous and have given themselves up to sensuality, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. You must no longer walk as they do. Now, Paul is not just necessarily ragging on the Ephesian culture here. He's saying, you must no longer. He's saying, you used to do this. You used to be one of these. God has drawn you out of that culture. Just like he drew Israel out of Egypt, he has drawn you, church in Ephesus, he has drawn you out of that culture, a culture that was dominated by the worship of Artemis. You know, Ephesus, just for some background information, a huge booming metropolis city. Technologically advanced because it had trade routes that come through it, major trade routes, bringing in new ideas, new technologies, lots of money. Very, very wealthy. In fact, the Temple of Artemis was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And he's saying, you know, how he describes the culture here is callous, given up to sensuality, greedy to practice impurity. And he's saying, you've been drawn out of that. You are to be different. And not just different on the inside. In fact, Paul specifically calls them out. He says, you must walk, or you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do. You ever hear that phrase, if you talk the talk, you better walk the walk? Meaning, you know, if you put, you know, your actions had better match up with what you're saying. So he's saying this walk here is not just about on the inside, it's what you do. You no longer do as the Gentiles do. You must be drawn out of and be different than the culture that surrounds you. As Paul would write in Philippians, he would say, I want you to shine like stars in a crooked and depraved generation. I want you, Philippians, I want you to be as different from the light as it is of the dark. You know, think about a star. What is different about a star than the night sky that surrounds it? Everything is different about it. You've got a whole black sky right there, and then pink, a little dot of light. What if that star was like, well, I just want to shine on the inside. I'll just shine my light inwardly. But on the outside, not so much. What would the night sky look like? Nothing. It'd be nothing if it weren't shining, if it weren't trying to be different than the night sky around it. Now he says here, you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do. And then he gives some specifics on what that's going to look like, specifically how you treat people and how you talk. And then chapter 5, verse 1, therefore be imitators of God. So we've got God telling Israel, don't be like the culture you're surrounded by. Be holy as I am holy. Be holy like me. Then he comes to Ephesus and he says, you must not be like the culture you're surrounded by. Be imitators of me. Be imitators of God. Because following the culture leads to idolatry. That's what happened with Israel. When they got into the land of Canaan and they got good and comfortable and they allowed the culture to seep into their mindset, they began worshiping idols and sacrificing their children, as God specifically said, don't do that. Here in Ephesus, surrounded by a culture of Artemis worship If they had been just like the culture, and what if it was just on the inside? What if they just said, well, I will follow God on the inside, but I'm still going to go to the temple with my friends. That's the hangout. I'm still going to kiss the statue of Caesar's foot and say, Hail Caesar, God of everything, so that I can go into the market. How would you be an example, Ephesians, church in Ephesus, how would you be an example for Christ if you look just like the whole line of people going by and slapping the foot of Caesar, claiming him as God and going into the temple and burning incense? You would just be a dark night sky. Following the culture leads to idolatry. So he says to Israel, don't be like the culture, be holy. He says to Ephesus, don't be like the culture, be imitators of God. To us today, do you think the message has changed? I would dare say that God's message to us today is still, don't be like the culture that you're steeped in. You're going to be surrounded by it, but don't become it. You are to be imitators of God. You are to be special. You are to be set apart. You are to be holy as I am holy. Now you may say that, well, there's nothing wrong with the culture we're surrounded by. I mean, okay, so Romans chapter 12, verse 2 says, be transformed by, no longer be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed. Don't be conformed to the pattern of the world. And sometimes it's easy to think that when we talk about the world, so long as we're not like those people on the other side of the world, we're not like the people in Asia who worship 1,000 different gods. We're not like the tribal people in Africa that worship ancestors and spirits. We're not like the people in dangerous cities around the places that have drug dealers and gang members and murderers. And so long as I'm not like those people, then that's good. That makes me different than the culture, right? It's easy to think that the culture here that I'm in the good old Bible Belt is okay to be like. But God says, don't be like the culture you're surrounded by. Be different. But what if the culture's good? What if I'm surrounded by good people and I watch good things? I watch good videos online. I watch good Netflix shows. I surround myself with good friends. Well, Ephesians chapter 5, it does not say, therefore be imitators of good people. It doesn't say be good imitators or be imitators of good social media. It says be imitators of God. Be imitators of God. And we have everything we need to know to be imitators of God right here. We don't need to look to videos of people who are doing amazing things. I mean, I know some really amazing people in my life that encourage me to want to be better. But that should not be our goal, to be like those people. Our goal should be to be like God. To the graduating class of 2023, be holy. Be special. Be different. Be set apart. Be imitators of God. This morning, if you feel like you have become just like the world around us, maybe it's time to do something a little different. If you need our help as a church, we would love to pray for you. If there's anything we can do for you, why don't you come as we stand and sing.